It began with a whisper. Not a voice, not even a sound, but something felt in the marrow, like the cold touch of a storm's breath just before it breaks. I had been sitting alone in my apartment that evening, the city beyond my window bathed in the orange glow of streetlights. The silence wasn't comforting. It was oppressive, like the air was waiting for me to notice something. It started small. Frost on the corners of my window, despite the mild winter. Symbols in the condensation, forming and vanishing before I could reach them with my trembling fingers. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then the feeling came. An inexplicable pull, a magnetic drag in my chest, the kind of sensation you get when a dream is trying to call you back. That night, I woke abruptly to the sound of a bell tolling faintly in the distance, though no such church existed anywhere nearby. My hand shot to my phone, its harsh glow a jarring anchor to the waking world. The time, 3:33 a.m. Of course it was. I don't know what compelled me to look at the photos in my gallery, but I did. A picture of me as a child, taken during a summer picnic, caught my attention. I wasn't alone in the frame. There was Lily, freckles across her sunburnt cheeks. Her hair caught in the wind. Her eyes, though, were strangely blank, gazing into the distance as if she'd heard something I couldn't. Lily. My heart twisted. She had disappeared when we were 12. No explanation, no closure. The memory of her absence had gnawed at me for years, but I had buried it under layers of adulthood. Until now. The whisper came again, clearer this time. It wasn't audible. It resonated within me, like a string plucked in my chest. It said one word. Come. By morning, I couldn't shake the feeling. The urge wasn't just a thought. It was a compulsion. I packed hastily, grabbing a jacket, boots, and a bag of essentials. By the time I started the drive to my childhood town, the frost on my window had melted, but its ghostly patterns lingered in my mind. The town was as I remembered, quaint, with crooked streets and the skeletal remains of summer gardens. But it was quieter than I expected. It didn't feel empty exactly. It felt paused, as though the air itself had held its breath. The chapel loomed at the edge of town, abandoned and forlorn. It had always unnerved me as a child, with its peeling paint and perpetually locked doors. My steps faltered as I approached, the air growing colder with every inch I closed between us. The heavy oak doors were slightly ajar, the dark interior beckoning. I crossed the threshold. Inside, the stillness was suffocating. Dust hung in beams of weak light, spilling through cracked stained glass, casting fractured rainbows on the warped wooden pews. And there, in the center of the room, lay a single candle. Its flame flickered unnaturally, as though stirred by a wind that wasn't there. Then I saw her. She wasn't quite visible, but she wasn't invisible either. A shimmer. A figure just on the edge of existence. Lily. Her form wavered, her features blurred, but her presence was undeniable. My heart seized in my chest. "Rowan," she whispered. Her voice was like autumn leaves brushing against stone, familiar, yet distant. "Lily." My voice cracked. It felt too loud in the oppressive quiet of the chapel, like an intrusion. Her form flickered, a reflection on rippling water. The air around her shimmered faintly, and for a moment I thought she might vanish altogether. But her head tilted, and the indistinct contours of her face focused on me. "You came," she murmured. Her voice carried an ache, a weight that pinned me in place. "I don't understand," I managed, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. You're here. What happened to you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the candle, her hand translucent and trembling. I hesitated before stepping closer. The flame danced wildly as I neared, casting eerie shadows that crawled up the chapel walls. Light. Lily whispered. "It's fleeting here. What does that mean?" My voice was steadier now, but dread curled in my stomach. "Where are you? What is this place?" She sighed, a sound like wind through a cracked window. "I don't know anymore. I remember the woods, the clearing, the light that pulled me. After that, it's fragments. I've been trying to piece it together, but something keeps them from me." Her words carried a desperation I had never heard in life. My pulse quickened as I took another step closer, the cold deepening with each inch. "Why now?" I asked. "Why bring me here?" She hesitated, her form wavering like a flame about to extinguish. Then she said something that froze me to my core. "It's not just me, Rowan. There's something else. It's watching." My skin prickled as the shadows on the walls seemed to thicken, creeping closer to the edges of the light. I spun instinctively, scanning the room, but saw nothing, yet the weight of a presence pressed down on me like a second gravity. "What's watching?" I demanded, my voice sharp with fear. Lily's form flickered violently, her face twisting into something unreadable, before settling. "It doesn't want me to leave, and if you're not careful, it won't let you leave either." The flame guttered, plunging the chapel into shadow. Darkness wrapped around me like a heavy shroud as the candle's flame surrendered. My breath caught in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for a sliver of light, but the screen remained stubbornly black, unresponsive. The oppressive silence deepened, thick as molasses, yet vibrating faintly with an unseen energy. "Lily." My voice was a fragile thread in the void. A flicker to my left, faint and silvery, revealed her spectral form. Her face hovered just at the edge of recognition, blurred and undefined, but her eyes, deep wells of sadness, were clear and steady. "You have to listen," she said, her voice carrying over the void like a whisper through fog. "Time here is different. The longer you stay, the harder it will be to leave." "What's keeping you here?" I asked, clutching at the frigid air between us. "What is this place?" Her form wavered again, distorting like a reflection in disturbed water. "It's a tether, an anchor, to the moment I was taken. The light. It wasn't light. It was something alive, something ancient. It bound me, Rowan. It holds me." "Bound you?" My pulse thundered in my ears. "To what?" "To this place, to that clearing, to it." The weight of her words settled in my chest like a leaden stone. "I need you to help me break the bond, but there's a cost." "What cost?" She hesitated, her form dimming. "To sever my bond, you have to form one of your own. A pact." The room seemed to contract around me, the shadows pressing closer, as though the chapel itself disapproved of our conversation. "What kind of pact?" My voice trembled. Her face softened, her sadness blooming into something sharper. "To borrow its light, to undo what it has done, you'll have to open yourself to it." A shiver skated down my spine. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't." Her voice cracked, almost pleading. "But if you don't help me, it will find another way, and I'm afraid of what that means for you, for everyone." The darkness stirred then, a low, thrumming vibration rolling through the chapel like distant thunder. The shadows on the walls writhed, taking on shapes, abstract and malevolent, that dissolved when I tried to focus on them. I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. "What do I have to do?" Lily's form brightened, though faintly, as though the question itself had stoked her vitality. "In the clearing, you'll find its mark. Stand within it, call its name, and let it answer. It will bargain with you." I shook my head. "Bargain for what?" "For its release, for its light, for me." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "But Rowan..." Be careful. It lies. The air in the chapel grew colder, and the oppressive hum deepened, as though something vast and unseen was leaning closer. Without another word, Lily faded, leaving me in the choking dark. The clearing was exactly as I remembered it from childhood, but somehow wrong, like a painting that had been subtly warped. The trees stood unnaturally still, their skeletal branches arched toward the night sky, as though in supplication. The earth beneath my feet was soft and cold, the grass brittle as ash. The mark Lily had spoken of wasn't hard to find. A perfect circle etched into the soil and glowing faintly, pulsed like a heartbeat. Symbols I couldn't decipher twisted along its edge, their shapes shifting as my eyes tried to follow them. The air here was heavier, charged with an unnatural electricity that set my teeth on edge. I stepped into the circle. Instantly, the world changed. The air snapped tight, pressing against my skin like a second layer. The forest around me seemed to draw back, retreating into an infinite distance. All sound evaporated, replaced by a deep, resonant vibration that I felt more than heard. Speak. The voice wasn't audible. It bypassed my ears and struck directly into my mind, cold and commanding. What are you? My voice felt small, insignificant. I am light, it answered, though the word carried 1,000 meanings. I am memory, I am permanence, and you are trespasser. I'm here for Lily, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. She was taken, bound. I want her freed. The silence stretched, sharp and suffocating. Then the voice returned, heavy with disdain. Her freedom is not yours to give. She chose to see, to step into my light. She belongs to me now. Then take me instead, I blurted, my pulse pounding. If that's what it takes to set her free. The vibration deepened, a ripple of icy laughter threading through it. A willing sacrifice, rare indeed, but you misunderstand. The light surrounding the circle flared, casting everything in sharp, silvery relief. Shadows reared from the ground, dancing with grotesque shapes. You are not enough. The bond is forged in permanence, but a soul alone cannot sever it. You must give more. What does that mean? I demanded, though dread already gnawed at the edges of my resolve. You must carry me, the voice intoned, slow and deliberate. Bind yourself to my essence, become my vessel. The weight of its demand threatened to crush me. And if I refuse? The forest seemed to lean in, the darkness between the trees thickening. Then you will leave, and she will stay, forever. The clearing pulsed with expectation. My body trembled as the cold seeped deeper into my bones. I thought of Lily's face, the desperation in her voice, the years of wondering what had happened to her. Do it, I said, my voice barely audible. The light flared violently, enveloping me in its grasp. The light consumed everything. For a moment, there was no ground beneath me, no sky above. I floated in a vast, shimmering void where the air was heavy with whispers. They overlapped, layered and disjointed, yet each distinct, voices pleading, weeping, some laughing with hollow despair. Each whisper brushed against my mind, leaving fragments of their stories etched in my thoughts. Then the light began to press inward. It wasn't physical, but it felt alive, sentient, sifting through my memories, my fears, my very essence. Every thought, every hope I had buried deep within myself was pulled to the surface and scrutinized. I felt smaller with every passing second, my sense of self unraveling under the weight of its gaze. You carry me now. The words weren't spoken. They bloomed inside me like a poisonous flower. My body jolted as the light contracted, condensing into a single point within my chest. The whispers faded, but the weight of them remained, an aching presence nestled in my ribcage. When I opened my eyes, the forest had returned. The clearing was quiet, untouched, as if the unnatural circle and its pulsating light had never existed. The stillness was deafening, and the air, though cold, lacked the supernatural bite it had carried moments before. I staggered back a step, every nerve in my body raw. "Rowan," her voice pulled me around. Lily stood at the edge of the clearing, her form now solid. Human. Her freckled face was exactly as I remembered, her wide eyes filled with disbelief and sorrow. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her gaze dropping to my chest. "I didn't have a choice," I said, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. "You're free now. That's what matters." Her head shook slowly. "It's not that simple." "What do you mean?" My voice edged with desperation. She stepped closer, her face pale and shadowed with guilt. "You don't understand. It didn't let me go. It traded. The bond isn't broken. It's past." Her words hit me like icy water. "No, that's not what it said." "It never tells the truth, Rowan," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It keeps its promises, but not how you expect." I tried to speak, but the air seemed to congeal in my throat. Deep within my chest, a pulse stirred, a faint rhythm that wasn't my own. It resonated outward, subtle but insistent, like an echo of the light's presence. "Now you're its anchor," she continued. "Its vessel, its gateway." The shadows in the clearing deepened as she spoke, curling at the edges of my vision. My knees buckled, but I caught myself, my hands sinking into the cold, brittle grass. The realization struck with the force of a gale. I hadn't freed her. I had exchanged one prison for another. "I'll fight it," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll find a way to undo this." Her expression softened, a flicker of hope dancing in her eyes. "You have to try. But Rowan, it doesn't let go easily. It'll use you, just like it used me." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The pulse inside me grew stronger, a steady drumbeat that resonated with the earth beneath my feet. The ground trembled faintly, the clearing dimming as though the light itself was retreating. "I should go," Lily said after a long silence. "I can't stay, not with it still here." Her form began to fade, her edges blurring like mist caught in sunlight. Panic surged through me, but I knew I couldn't hold her. Whatever bond we'd shared was unraveling, its thread pulled taut by the thing I now carried. "Lily, wait!" I reached out, but my hand passed through empty air. "What happens now?" She hesitated, her fading figure lingering just long enough to meet my gaze. "It starts slow, whispers, shadows. Then the doors it opens." Her voice broke off as her form dissolved completely, leaving only the stillness of the forest. I stared at the spot where she had stood, the weight in my chest sinking deeper, rooting itself firmly inside me. The forest was silent now, too silent. When I turned to leave, the path back to town stretched unnaturally long, the gnarled branches arching overhead like the ribs of a great beast. The shadows moved at the edges of my vision, subtle but undeniable, shapes that didn't belong. And somewhere far behind me, almost imperceptible, a whisper rose. It wasn't Lily's voice. It was deeper, older, and filled with something cold and infinite. "Come." The pulse within me quickened. I didn't look back.